Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is April 13, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank the presence of the Venice Bike Path for introducing me to Evan Laurence for part two. Where in the heck you calling in from, Evan?
Part two. Playa del Rey, California, right on the other side of that bike path, where we met in front of the library, no less.
That is so cool. And we had a great time. And part one was really fun to review. We'll start right off. What's the function of music?
Well, you can't eat it. Um, you don't technically need it, but it has a strong power over people's emotional state, their comprehension of life, which is so intricately intertwined with those neurochemicals that is their emotional state. I mean, man, music can just take you completely to another place, like
Yeah.
that, faster than an airplane. Yeah, it's like a portal into other emotional dimensions.
Really good. I want to just survey because I've been making the list, having researched this for years, and you can react to any of these other ones. My favorite is what's the function of music? There is none. I love that. It is amazing because, Igor Stravinsky did lectures that music means nothing. And I mean, that's maybe the great mystery or magic of music, that if you hear a sound, it doesn't have to mean this or that. When you read a word, we're sort of convinced, oh, it means this or that. But, music has this portal, like you said, like trans, going beyond time and space. But John Cage said he learned from his teacher that it soothes the soul and makes it susceptible for divine intervention.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's a good one. And then Mickey Hart, the Grateful Dead drummer, said it's a warning system. Like they're coming to take our food, so the guy would hit the log and beat out a drum, rhythm, and it was communication.
It was a form of communication. Um, I don't know if it can be a warning. It can be a sign on the side of the road that says, someone's been here before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was once at one of these like corporate functions and they had this Navy SEAL guy speaking and it was totally cheesy, but they showed all these Navy guys and they had been like running marathons in full army garb and they hadn't slept in days and they go through so much abuse to try to become Navy SEALs, and they're all laying in the ocean. They must have some kind of flotation devices, but like they're in so much pain, and they're laying in the ocean, enduring this like cold water at night, and they're all banded arms, and they're singing "Silent Night" together, like the
Oh
big
my
tough
God.
Navy SEAL guys. Yeah, so like music, you can't eat it. It's not gonna like protect you from a thunderstorm, but it has some function to inspire the soul to
Yeah.
keep you going.
Well, you just reminded me of another one. So this is a learning device. This woman who wrote books, she's on NPR, is saying she was raised in the Caribbean and her mother never read a book. She said, but her mother knew what to do when a tsunami hit from a song that she sang growing up. So
Okay.
it is a learning device. And then my other friend Dylan Buston says the function of music is to dance. I mean, that's evident, to move your body. But one of my favorites is Norman Zamchek. He says, to keep us from going insane.
Yeah, you need a whole support system around that cause.
Yeah, that's Peter Lorre is satirized in a Spike Jones song, and he goes, "You're driving me sane." And the other ones are entertainment, pleasure, connection, community, ceremony. So it's pretty endless. And I just found this. Shakespeare says the earth has music for those who listen. So, it's that flip of what's called biomimicry. Did we grow up humans hearing the birds sing and then we imitated them? Or did humans whistle and hum and sing and then the birds imitated us?
Good question. You know, when the birds chirp, the flower petals open. There's some connection there. The chirping of the birds causes the flower petals to open up.
I didn't know that. I have to write that down.
Yeah.
Chirping of birds causes flower petals to open. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
You're teaching me a lot, my friend. That's cool. So Aaron Copland says the four elements or ingredients of music are melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. Now there's more, but just let's go with those four. In non-academic terms, what would you say to the normal person? What is tone color?
Uh, timbre. I mean, from like a physics perspective, the voice, the instrument is going to have a different sound in different rooms. This is why people like singing in the shower. Well, maybe just because there could be other reasons. Let's say the vulnerability of it, the physical sensations. But yeah, you have all these tiles in there, and it bounces. The sounds bounce off each other, and they combine in new ways that creates something called timbre, depth. So it's not just one note. You're not just singing an A. Once that A note bounces off all the walls, and the physics of it causes those sounds to distill into other frequencies, and those other frequencies combine with each other to create new notes, um, harmonic. What's it called?
Harmonic resonance?
Yeah, there's harmonic resonance and harmonic dissonance, and usually both
Yeah,
sound pretty good. Yeah. So
amazing.
that's
Because yeah, that's really good because I'm curious. I've never had it explained that way. That's really beautiful. But how do you integrate, how do you navigate those four elements when you're writing an Evans song? I know it probably varies if there's a ritual or any process, but just do you favor one over the other? Melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color. How do you kind of, you
uh,
know,
feel, 100% feel, meaning. When I'm writing a song, it'll typically come from some memory or some unknowable source. That's when you're writing a lot of songs, and the muse is really talking to you, and you just start to get images, ideas, symbols, more like a dream, and your hands are just doing things that you learned long ago when you were maybe in more of a technical state of mind. Your voice starts doing things that you probably imitate from your idols, from Elvis Presley to whoever you listen to these days. And it really has more to do with meaning and feel.
yeah. And my friend says the three T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. Technique, you've learned how to play. Theory, you know the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Yeah, you listen. Um, you need to be able to step outside of yourself. If the ego is too involved, it'll screw up the taste. If you can pull the ego out of it and just look objectively and say, well, I kind of like these parts, but not so much of those parts. Seems like it can use a little more something. Just like making a recipe, right?
Yeah.
Just salt to taste, that sort of thing. But if the ego is in the way too much, and then it starts to impede with the taste making.
Very interesting, because McLuhan said years ago, song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment on that?
Yeah, maybe, huh? I mean, I was listening to Oasis yesterday morning. Like the British rock guys,
Yeah,
and I was like singing along in my car. Oh, Jerry, it was awesome. And I was like, what about these British guys? Like, they write such good hooks, you
yeah,
know, like the Beatles. And I guess there's some American artists who do that too. But they were influenced by the English artists, guys like
yeah,
Tom Petty. And then, you think about the Irish kind of bar singing and the way it has this sort of roving, lyrical, clever wanderer, this rhyming lyricism, like somebody's kind of on a drunk on a cobblestone road and they're flirting it up and being chatty with everyone, and those songs sound more like that. When you think about rap and that inner city, that urban feel, or R&B and soul,
yeah.
and yeah, I think it's has a lot to do with the atmosphere of language that it comes out of.
What's more fundamental, music or language?
Oh, um, huh. I'm gonna say language. I hate to say it. I'd love to say music because it's a cooler answer, but language is more fundamental to people's survival, and that's why kids learn it first. They
Yeah,
learn how to talk, and then they take an interest and learn how to play the piano.
yeah,
Yeah, but the kids, when they're a 1 year old or 2 years old, and they're trying to figure out what am I going to need to do to survive in this life, they quickly assimilate that language is one of the necessities. You got to get that down pretty soon.
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
Laugh. Flight and the Bumblebee.
There you go, right off the bat. So Thelonious Monk talked about, a silence is the loudest sound in the universe. How do you know when not to play? You know, uh, how do you integrate silence in a musical composition? Because
Yeah.
the whole point is like I'm going to fill this space with these sounds, and then talk about silence in your writing, your process.
Yeah, well, Thelonious Monk was a jazz musician, right? So I'm sure that comment was he was pouring it on thick for
Yeah,
some of his peers who he probably had sessions with, jam sessions, right? Silence is the loudest sound in the universe, but no, silence is great. It's one of the essential um, tools, one of the essential weapons in the arsenal. I think it's very good for suspense. Nothing like
right.
just stopping the song right in the middle and then coming back in, or coming back in even with the best part. That's powerful move employed by the best pop and rock groups.
Yeah, it's funny because George Clinton said funk is the absence of, so is it dynamics? But I'm just curious, with you saying suspense, is that dynamics? So using silence. Well, actually, it's this artist, I we he says, for me, silence is music. Would you
Hmm.
say that's true, or is it something different?
I mean, if you're meditating and tuning into the rhythm of your brain, you know, no, I think music has more like the four elements, like you were talking
Yeah,
about rhythm and melody and things like that. Now, of course, it's sort of like the atom, where you find out that, well, the atom is right. It's 99.999 whatever percent space. I wouldn't say that much for music, but you only play the note for a moment, but it resonates.
yeah.
So, chong, chong, but the motions of the hand were very quick, but it made a lot of sound. So, um, you know, there's a lot of space in between the notes that are played.
Very interesting, because the next silence quote I would love to hear your reaction to in this regard, Evan, is Thomas Carlyle. He said, "Speech is of time, silence is of eternity." So, you use that word resonance. Which one resonates more, the sound or the silence?
Yeah,
But it is, just saying speech is of time, silence is of eternity. Any thoughts on that?
yeah, I agree with that. Because time is transient and speech is transient, and I have whole friendships, lifelong friendships, where I can barely recount two or three things that they ever said. It was all in passing. I mean, in the moments, as we are now, every word mattered.
Yeah.
We were communicating things, but the time passes like water on a river, and so too the words. But yeah, you ever go to the top of the mountain and chill and meditate and just listen to the breeze or just the silence up there, you feel tapped into something much older than any of us.
That's amazing, because on my silence page, I just added, will there ever be silence? Because that's a question they asked Marshall McLuhan once. He says, will there ever be silence? And he goes, things only exist in relation. So me and you could get in a car and drive for 45 minutes and then walk for 15 minutes and be in the desert and sit on a rock, and I swear we would hear silence. But in essence, what we're hearing is the relationship of the car noise for 45 minutes and our feet walking on the sand for 15 minutes, because you cannot hear silence, according to John Cage. When he wrote the great song 433, they put him in a chamber so he says, I want to hear silence, and he couldn't, because his heart beats and his blood pumps. But the relationship is, we're not hearing that right now because we're not in this chamber. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's the relationship of your ears and the environment, whether you'll ever hear silence.
Yeah, yeah. And also, if you ever took me out to the desert like that, I'd probably never shut up. You know, I don't know if you'd get, the neurotic Jew or Hunter S. Thompson, but like one or the other would probably just come screaming out of my. Um, yeah. I don't know. You need some of those noise canceling headphones, I guess.
Yeah.
But you could still, yeah, you still hear your own pulse.
Yeah, but not necessarily. If you had those headphones, you might not hear it because you're not in this chamber where it's isolating you. So it's this. But no, that was good. We really covered silence well. So, and I appreciate that. Now on to time. Why is 4/4 time the most commonly used time signature in Western music?
Oh, I don't know. Four on the floor. It's just that's what makes the women shake their tails. Uh,
I haven't had that answer. This is a new question for me. And I love this. Wayne Pete, a great local musician, told me because we have two hands and 2 feet. That's
oh,
why
that's clever.
that was interesting, but it's also here's how it's been explained. Besides being intuitive and easy, it might be because it's in sync with walking or marching or our heartbeat rhythm. So, what time signature do you think our heartbeat is in?
Well, it's supposed to be a little bit asymmetrical, right? I think that when your heart is healthy, there's some degree of randomness. If I'm not sure about that, but I think that's a sign of heart health.
Wow, I've heard that.
Yeah, but it's usually pretty steady, right? People get really into heart rate when they get into distance running, and they wear all these devices and stuff so that they know what their heart rate is, and then that informs their maximum oxygen intake and you know how much muscle atrophy they can withstand at a certain point. It's all tied into a formula, but yeah, heartbeat. I mean, is that four on the floor? It's more like boom, boom, one and one and two, one and two, one and two. Yeah, I guess you could do one, two, three. It's probably more
Yeah,
like that
someone
too.
said it's 3/4 time.
Yeah, sounds
But
about right.
I think you're right. And another person said it's 5/8 time. So it's an interesting thing because this is what Captain Beefheart said. He wanted to vary from that mama heartbeat. He said that that same old 4/4 rhythm is related to fascism. It's so fixative and so hypnotic that it's dangerous to the heart. It's, disco is faster than the heartbeat. So he wanted to create non hypnotic music to break us out of that catatonic state. Yeah.
It is very hypnotic. Absolutely. Yeah. We were talking about music before, and there's a couple people who don't listen to music. There's not a
Yeah.
lot of them. There was this one guy, he's like this natural food guy, um, like a black activist dude. I forgot his name, really out there guy. He treated John Lennon and Yoko when they were having heroin withdrawals. And he like refuses to listen to music. He's like, they just brainwash you. I got the blues. I got these problems. He's like, I'm not going to let that into my mind. I keep my mind pure. I don't listen to music.
Wow. I didn't know. I want to look into him because there's so many new John Lennon films and Yoko films coming out, and there's a lot written about his life. And I'm very curious who that was. I would love to. And it's not Amira Baraka, is it? Because
I'm
Amir
not.
Baraka was a poet. He was a writer named Leroy Jones, and then he changed his name to Amir Baraka, and he was a amazing poet. But I don't. I think no, he loved jazz. He was into all the jazz scenes, so it's not him. But I want to. I want to. That's grounds for further research. Thank you.
Yeah, this guy, no, he's more of like, I don't have the whole story straight, but he was more like a vegan,
Yeah,
really free thinking, kind of like a Marcus Garvey sort of a thinker, free your
yeah,
mind sort of a person, and a dietitian. I think he lived to be very healthy, did a lot of walking.
yeah.
Yeah. But I just never really heard that before. He's like
Yeah,
refused to listen to music because of its hypnotic quality, tying it
yeah,
back to Captain Beefheart. He didn't want
yeah.
to be hypnotized. Yeah.
Well, and people who hear Beefheart like run out of the room, like they go, "That's not music," and it is funny because I remember one of my best friends saying, "I says, what do you think of this music?" He goes, "I'm not an expert on music." I says, "What do you mean? How can you not be an expert on music? We hear music from day one. It's not like you have to know how it's made or anything. Your mom's singing lullabies to you, you know." So
Hmm.
I think fasting, I mean, I love his effort to fast from not hearing music. That's impossible. You cannot not hear music, you know. You can listen to it less. I mean, I was always addicted to playing music, having it going all the time. And now as I get older, sometimes I'm like, hey, silence is okay, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Silence is nice. It's really
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Because when I ride my bike at 6 in the morning, I swear I hear silence, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
That's good
but
stuff.
yeah, it's hard. But here's another phenomenon with music. In the LA Free Press in 1969 asked Frank Zappa about Pauline Oliveros. Her work with sound above the audible and below, creating a mass. And Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some indifference tone, which happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something so low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle you could hear. Whether you like it or not is another question. The concept's brilliant. So, any thoughts on that? Some indifference tone, located within an audible frequency range, like something so high and so low, it creates something in the middle you couldn't hear.
Well, sound doesn't really work like that. Light does. That's how you get what's called a metamer. Um, right? Like if you mix uh, green and red paint, what do you get?
Green and red, what do you get? I don't know. Tell me.
Yellow,
Purple?
right? I'm not a painter, but
Oh, so you call it meta. Tell me the spelling on the second part of the
it's
word.
called a metamer. Matamer.
MER.
So
Okay.
yeah, and so same thing works for light though. So if you're to mix green and red light and project it on a wall, and you're sitting in front of me, so you can't see that I'm projecting a green and red light. I'm just projecting them both on the same spot. You're just going to see a yellow spot on the wall.
Wow.
Those lights that's called a metamer, right? It's two different bands of light mixing right before
Yeah.
your eyes, and then your eyes see yellow, not green and red. Whereas with music, we have all these kind of filters in our ear and the eardrum and the whole physiology of it, and then the way that our mind separates it into different ranges, different sounds. So actually, our mind does exactly the opposite. I could give you this kind of white noise, but if you listen close enough, you'll be able to pick out all the different tones in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Way to go. I've never had that broken down that way. That helps me.
Yeah,
And
your ear is
it's,
shaped kind of like a conch shell, So like even just the shape of your ear is starting to filter out the sound waves on a physics level. And then there's these hairs called cilia, and then the eardrum, and the different parts of your brain responsible for different tones. It's pretty interesting, but there's a very complex system in place for that.
it's funny too, because it also brings up that idea that we don't have ear lids, we have eyelids. So we can actually shut our eyes and not see something. But you can plug your ears with your fingers, or like you said, with headphones, but the sound still leaks through. Something still leaks through, you know.
Yeah, yeah, but what's the joke about old married couples? They're like conveniently like my dad has lost hearing in a certain range of sound, just so
Yeah.
happens to be the ones that my mom's voice is in.
Ah, well, it's really freaky because this other guy I interviewed last week is a scholar in avant-garde jazz, free jazz. You know, the screechy Albert Eiler or Nat Coleman, you know, wild improv. And his dad was deaf most of his life. He's still alive, and it's gradually gotten worse. He was born percentage deaf, and it's gotten worse. And his dad loved to sing, and his dad would sing out of key.
Uh-huh.
And so it's evident he developed at some point. He went along and never heard out jazz. Then when he heard out jazz, it just spoke to him, and now he loves it and he writes books about it. And it was like that's probably what led him to it, because his dad singing out of key enabled him to hear music that wasn't, honed beautifully and shaped, like it's supposed to be. Like, how can anyone say, well, this is good music and that is bad music? All music is just music. But we want to do that taste thing. you know like you said, we develop taste. Why did you gravitate towards listening to Oasis? Or I love that you would bring up gospel and blues people. Why'd you gravitate towards that and not something else? Because you have
Mhm.
some sort of discernment or aesthetic that's guiding you there. So it's funny what shapes that. So you've performed music. I might have asked you this one, but I'm going to ask you it again because I didn't have a record of it. Is Ruth Draper said the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. How do you do that? And especially you played on stages over the years, but now you sometimes play in the street. How do you bring the audience into the song with you?
Well, eye contact is very powerful. Um, when you get outside of yourself and uh, I don't know, stop performing for anyone and just start channeling the purity of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah, people pick up on it when you're kind of transmitting as if you were some kind of biological antenna speaker mechanism that uh, but also that has a like a soul, a soul that interprets things, soul to soul. That's the
Soul
way.
to soul. That's really good. That's actually what Dylan says. He's just a radio receptor, and it's just, he's just receiving these, like you talked about the muse, or channeling this energy. But the other two questions I asked in that regard after Ruth, we did cover, and the one was Leonard Cohen saying the only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk, and if you don't do that, people know. And then I asked you the Viola Spolin quote: if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it.
Hmm.
So, you talked about that, that people will pick up on that. The listener will pick up on that.
The latter might be more true for writers. It seems that like a book with no conflict, where the character, the protagonist is has nothing to overcome, is lacking a certain tension.
Yeah.
And there's a very rich medium to draw from when you have paradoxes
Yeah.
where they want to do one thing but they have to do something else, or they are like this but they're also like that, and
Yeah.
those two things are pulling against each other like a rubber band. that's rich stuff for literature. In terms of music, you could go a lot of different ways because it's soul to soul, but sometimes someone's soul expression is like electronic dance music.
Yeah.
I'll never understand why, but there have been moments when I did. I'm like, oh, I get it. It's just like energy, 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 energy. So that was somebody's soul expression, and it hit me. It had enough to the composition that it got me. I felt it. And music can be a lot of things. It can be lewd. It can be, because those are all parts of the human experience. So there's not so much about the artist. It's more about the way it hits you with music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually what McLuhan did mid-career. He updated the medium is the message, or the medium is the massage, to the user is the content. It's how the person, the observer, the listener uses it. Once the artist makes it, it's no longer theirs. The user can do whatever they want with it.
Mhm.
It's and so that's that. Well, the commonality I saw was when I asked this great singer who sang with Frank Zappa and Napoleon Murphy Brock about the Leonard Cohen, you put yourself at risk, and if you don't do that, people know. He said, I leave risk in the dressing room. And
Mhm.
I thought, oh, you mean you want to go on stage feeling confident? That's how I interpret it. You want to feel like, and when I asked you the struggle question, you sort of said no, that you shifted it to writers, that if the audience doesn't see you struggling to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it. And then you said no, that was, you were almost answering that part the way Napoleon answered it. And I'm curious, I haven't formed this question yet, but then is that, that's vulnerability. Audiences like to see the performer kind of fail because it's endearing. I paid $100 and you flubbed there. Oh my God, you're human. It shows their humanness. But it also they don't want them to fail or flub, but it maybe is more endearing for the audience. So I mean, what is that role of confidence? Is it, maybe just talk about confidence. Is that what you're talking about? I got to feel I'm assured what I'm doing.
I mean, it might do something for the artist to have that inner conflict. Like they might be able to perform better with all that going on inside. I don't really know if anyone doesn't have that, to some degree. It just depends on how much. When you go to see Brian Jonestown Massacre, we were talking about Joel Gian earlier in the book that he wrote. You don't know if they're gonna have like one of these sets where they're like on point. They're like a well-oiled, you know, garage rock, fuzzed out psychedelic machine, or if they're just going to have a meltdown on stage
Yeah.
and half the members are going to leave and they're going to put on a show and the singer is going to have sort of a schizo episode on the audience. I mean, that really happens when you get a ticket to their concert. It's a gamble, you know. Uh, but
Yeah, it's like Perry Farrell admitting he's been on heroin for 40 years and then attacking his guitarist on stage, and everybody's got it on YouTube. And it's like, dude, you can have fallouts with your band members, but don't attack them. But, it happened.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. In comparison with their stepbrother bands, the Dandy Warhols, who consistently put on a good show.
Yeah.
But there's not as much tension in their music. There's not as much tension in the show.
Yeah.
There's just something badass about BJM. And if you get them on a good night, it's like, whoa, it's really gonna blow their minds. Yeah. So.
I think they might have learned from the Grateful Dead. Rodney Bingenheimer said the Dead killed rock and roll. The Dead have great shows over their 50 or 60 years, but there are a lot of ones where they weren't great. And so you live and learn, whether you're going to keep investing money and time to see him, or say, I'll never see him again. It's like people who bitch about Dylan, they pay $100 or $200 and then they go, he sounded like a frog. It's like, well, you're still paying the money, you're still paying the money to see him. And so he's going to keep touring.
Ah,
So
yeah, Dylan's like that. Yeah, I see what you're getting at now, Jerry. It's the risk factor. There's still spontaneity. They're still putting it out there on the line where kind of anything can happen, and it's
yeah,
not this just rehearsed thing.
yeah,
It's not perfection. They're going to
yeah,
take risks, and that people do dig that spontaneity. Yeah,
yeah,
that's a turn on for people.
yeah.
Mhm.
They want to feel it's special. That's like the Steely Dan used to open for Zappa, and they would go backstage and say, "Why we have to play our songs like they are on the records? Why don't you?" And he says, "Because I don't want to." So was Steely Dan saying the record company's pressuring us to play our music like it is on the record, or we want to keep doing that? Because
Mhm.
in playing music over and over, there is some fine subtleties, but it's like, yeah, you're going to play, we saw X in the marina. They're playing the same punk stuff for 40 years, and they played some other things, and they're good. They varied off. But my friend turned to me and he goes, they were a lot better when they were drunk. It was a bunch of you white yuppies, not even pogoing or anything, no mosh pit, politely watching LA's quote greatest punk band. I was like, oh my God, give me a break.
Yeah, no element of danger, no spontaneity, no sense of adventure or exploration or discovery.
Yeah. It's like Devo on NPR's Tiny Desk. They sang a worried man, and the way Mark was singing, I thought you should have been saying, I'm a worn out man.
Hmm.
Believe me, I like them. I think they're great, but you play the same shit for 40 years, you're going to get worn out, and it's going to sound routinish. How are you going to make it sound fresh?
Yeah.
But that leads into literature, because you're Evan, you're an interesting gentleman. You go into studying psychology, then you went on this music kick, and then you turn into an engineer. So I want to go into the difference between art and science, but you're writing this memoir, you're interested in writing lyrics. I'm curious, what's the difference between narrative and storytelling? Is there a difference, or how do you differentiate them?
Oh wow. Yeah, I prefer first person storytelling. Of course, when you detect that someone is exaggerating the truth, the story starts to lose its value. And that's the issue with autofiction. Like I'm revisiting some Henry Miller stuff right now, and there's parts. Well, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot to like and a lot to not like. But there's parts where I can tell he's exaggerating the truth, and it's kind of like when you got that friend who tells you a story, and you're like, "No, you didn't. Come on, you're lying. You're
Right,
lying. You know."
right.
No, 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 really, no. That's what he said. I said that to him, and then you just ask, well, what did they say back? And then, well, I don't know. You're like, come on, you're lying to me,
Yeah.
right? So, well, the question was narrative and storytelling.
Well, let me address what you just said. Is Henry Miller considered autofiction? What is autofiction, basically? Is that autobiography, like, you mean?
Yeah, autobiography, but with a fiction element. So it's memoirs that have taken liberties,
Yeah.
and then I think you're free to take liberties, but if you go too far with it, then you lose your believability. I mean, I like storytelling. Like I'll listen to a story about Josh and Sarah or whatever. I'm really more interested in your story. Gerry. Like I'd rather hear about where you grew up and what you learned, and it's just more compelling to me to hear
Yeah,
people's actual stories is
yeah,
more interesting than to me, Anna Karenina. Uh, but Anna Karenina is a time and a place that I didn't live in,
yeah.
so in that respect, I'm like, huh, interesting. So that's how they did it in Russia back in those days, and these bourgeoisie people. And I also like, I do like stories about things that never occurred, sci-fi,
Yeah.
parables, Orwell kind of stuff. That's the difference between narrative and storytelling is whether it's happened or not.
Very interesting because one writer told me he heard narrative doesn't lie.
Mm,
And that's an interesting thing because you're like saying, okay, tell me the story. And then you sense your friends embellishing the story. Because that's where one of my mentors made up a word called splitteracy. And she said, with the S spelled with the dollar sign, and she said, when we invented printed word, we split the left and right brain. So before they're more, linear and, free, spontaneity and impulse and intuition is, forever weaving with linearity and rational, and feeling and thought, head and heart are both mixed. But when you write words, then you go, oh, it's this way. So you split the right and left brain and you sort of ruin everything because that's the way it should. And then that's what they say when they invented printed word is it ruined our memory and our sense of embellishing with imagination.
oh
You
man, that's a story. That's a made up story. Well,
It
and it
is.
enhanced everything.
It enhanced, but no, I think it did both
Yeah. I,
because yeah. No, go
go
ahead.
go for it, Jerry. Well, how many times have you learned a word for something and then it opened up like a whole new
Yeah.
meaning in your life? You're like, now that I know what the word for that is, like there's that famous German word, Schadenfreude, when somebody takes joy in someone else failing, right?
Yeah.
The suffering of another kind of secretly makes them happy, and you're like, oh, I know that. You know, all of us know it, and then, like now that there's a word for it, it crystallizes it. It brings it, now you know when it's happening. You see other
Yeah.
people doing it. It becomes more obvious, right? And then
Yeah.
words are like that. So I think they crystallize reality, but
Yeah.
this is my opinion. That's just my opinion.
No, but it can deceive. Words can be deceiving, but we think words work and they do. But sometimes they don't. Like T.S. Eliot said, when I talk to you, I've got to use words. It's like, no, you can use hand gestures and dance. Like I would say, let's do a Zoom for 90 minutes where no one can talk. So what do you do? You're going to hold, paper up to the camera, or you're going to do, you can communicate without these, but I'm curious. This take by Peter Greenway said, cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. So basically, printed word, spoken word is really old, but cinema is only 130 years old. So
Yeah.
it's basically been left to filming plays. That's where basically what we do is we film theater. But there's variations because I'm into experimental film and there's, gobbledygook and non-narrative and abstract cinema in that it's set aside. It's really cinemas is storytelling in the traditional sense, like in Godard says a great Hollywood films are just documentaries of actors acting.
Yeah, you can watch a movie with just symbols in it, symbolistic actions, like one of these Banwell, surrealist seemed like there was a lot more of that in the 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Oh yeah, when it first started, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you can still do that now. You can take a spool of film and douse it in bleach, and then run it back through the you know camera equipment backwards, and it'll just make a bunch of interesting shapes on the screen. And occasionally, you'll see a train or a car or something familiar. It might have a certain dreamlike quality to it, but people have a hard time finding the meaning in it.
yeah,
People like meaning,
yeah.
words, story, music, the whole thing wrapped together.
Well, perfectly leads to Hollis Frampton, who is an experimental filmmaker, said narrative was born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Why is it we need narrative? Why is it we need storytelling? Most people say, oh, no, we're hardwired to tell stories.
Yeah, yeah.
And is it because we're waiting to die, or is it, it's like, what was the motive of the cave artist?
Consciousness is just such a mystery. Life is so powerful and mysterious, and the emotions that we feel, and just people have a need to communicate it. People just feel a need to communicate to others and have others communicate to them, and you know that you're not alone in this thing. That's why solitary confinement is a punishment, one of the worst punishments, and not a reward.
Yeah, and a couple more on narrative and storytelling. I'm curious. McLuhan says all words are metaphoric. Then what is the word literal a metaphor for?
I mean, I guess I get it. Like, a jar is an abstract thing. Like, your jar is going to look different than my jar.
Yeah.
Is going to, I mean, and even if all jars were the same, so the word jar only meant one thing, the way that our brains represent them might be vastly different still. Like, or the associations we have with them. For some people, a jar is like a jar of honey. For someone else, it's like some traumatizing thing, you know, that, I don't know, grandpa was a doctor and used to store eyeballs in them and stuff like that. Yeah.
That,
Uh,
that's a guy on the Venice Boardwalk, the old freak show. That guy made it. That he made a bunch of money producing Santana and the Beastie Boys, and he bought all that Carney stuff, and he used to have like tie-dyed babies in formaldehyde in his garage in the valley, but he couldn't show them in the freak show because it was a little too weird. But he was obsessed with that whole Carney thing, eyeballs,
oh,
eyeballs in it. But I mean, I'm curious. That goes to my friend and I had a discussion. It's like, what are the virtues of great art? What are the virtues of great storytelling? You can mention these people like Henry Miller and Kerouac and these writers that you have read. And he said, it's basically the question is how does beauty rate? He says both both beauty and cleverness are kind of overrated. And he's for balance and contemplation and concern for others. He learned it from studying the I Ching, and I think you've studied Jung in in psychology. Jung.
mhm.
How does beauty rate? Is it a, I mean, is that what we're talking about or something different?
uh, Beauty, it's kind of overrated, but it's got its allure.
Yeah.
It's just like we were saying about words, literal words and metaphorical words.
Yeah.
If a jar means 100 different things to 100 different people, I mean, a jar might mean 100 different things to just one person, actually, but certainly the same is true for beauty.
Yeah.
What is beauty? Is it some girl on Insta, some young lady on Insta down in Venice, in the prime of her, uh, athletic shape, um, you know, doing some stupid dance to some stupid song? Is
Yeah.
that beauty? By a popular vote, it seems like yes. Or
Duh. I'm a, I'm a I'm a Venice girl watcher. I know about that. I'm a professional.
I'm not here to act like I'm above it, you know. Just to call it out for what it is.
Yeah.
Um, sir, yeah, uh, I'm a bit of a connoisseur myself.
Yeah.
And beauty is also right, like the lines in an old lady's face, and
Yeah.
the hard-earned life experiences, and that's beauty as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, Depends on what you're tuned into, and your ability to see that beauty. I'm sorry, what
It's
was the question again? I just went off
Well,
on a tangent.
it's basically I haven't formulated the question like you're my guinea pig. I'm trying to get to it, but it's like is beauty overrated? Like it's a stupid question, but it's basically beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But it is, I think you're searching meaning because see, I'm curious on how you go from psychology to music to engineering, and so I really like to delve into this one. What's the difference, or is there a difference between art and science? Jean Cocteau, and just to start off, Jean Cocteau said, art is science made clear.
Oh. uh, well, they're pretty vastly different.
And
Yeah, he
how do
says,
you articulate their difference?
well, in science, there's facts. And that's one of the things that's a relief about being an engineer and working with engineers is that even though some of the facts are still debatable, because you can always drill down more, drill down more, drill down more until you're all the way down to the atomic level. And then at that point, you can start looking at the quarks and the subatomic particles. But there's an ability to come to a factual agreement on things that titanium is harder than aluminum, that a roller skate wheel has a certain durometer, and that durometer is a measurement of its hardness, and that certain durometers are good for certain surfaces, and others are good for others for different reasons. The softness, the shock absorption, the friction, whatever qualities that you want in order to execute your roller skating moves. So when you're working with engineers, you have the privilege of communicating with people in a language of facts in a world where narrative so dominates. And you can really see that in the politics and stuff. And Orwell talked about this in 1984. It's like all someone has to do is come up with a narrative and then market it and defend it and slander the opposing narrative, and that becomes the thing that everyone believes or that the majority believes. And actually in science people try to adhere to this thing called fact. They don't always do it, especially in things like medicine where there's a lot of different, nobody really knows that well. They know some things. um,
Well,
so that
listen,
means
I like you brought up the word facts because how about this one? This French historian said, "Science finds no truths; it discovers unknown facts that can be interpreted a thousand ways."
there you go. Hmm. Yeah, there's still artistry to the interpretation
There you go. That's it. Yeah,
and the presentation. having some knowledge of art and literature and bringing that into a career in engineering is like superpower because you can communicate things. Art's all about
Well,
communication.
that's then is that how about this one? This is Chomsky. We learn more about ourselves from literature than from science.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You would agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to learn about yourself from science? You're made up of atoms?
Well,
Great.
how to eat good and exercise. Is that science? Well, that's actually reading self-help books.
Yeah. But then, what was it? It was in Dubliners, Joyce, right?
Yeah.
A cold bath, winter or summer. That's right. That was what the it was like this stodgy old guy, tough son of a bitch. And he used to take a cold bath, winter or summer. That was his quote. And I remember
And
reading that. Yeah.
that's funny
That's
because it makes you healthy. Because I noticed you dropped a Finnegan's Wake word there, quark, just a couple minutes ago. Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you're well versed. I'm not as well versed in the Dubliners as I should be, and it's funny because I'm I think science and art is something we can get deeper into, but I was curious, your thoughts on this one. I spoke with Michael Apted 40 years ago. I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Most people don't know rapid montage was invented in 1922 by Abel Gance. But in the 80s, it flourished with MTV to the point where Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with a bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
oh no, we can learn to go faster. You ever use like ChatGPT or any of the AI stuff?
Well, you can't not use it. Whenever you ask Google a question, it's AI. I mean, half of the answers or three-quarters of the answers come up and they tell you AI says this. So
Yeah.
no one cannot use it. It's like, but the real question, Evan, the hidden question is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
No, I think you do one thing at a time. So if you're multitasking, you're just switching channels really fast. That's it.
Yeah.
So I guess you are probably multitasking in that your parasympathetic nervous system is still doing its thing. Like you don't need to tell your heart to beat or your
Yeah.
lungs to breathe. So that's happening. And you don't need to tell your eyeballs to like assimilate all of these particles around you and prioritize them in terms of what's the most likely to cause me danger and like create this depth perception pick uh montage of what's in front of you here. That happens on its own. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you're like frying an egg, listening to music, talking on the phone, doing all that at once, I think you're actually just doing one thing at a time, but you're switching every millisecond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Compromise.
There's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right. In your with your accomplishments in your life, how do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Um, ambition is number one. You you're going to be guided by uh, your mental images, your self image, your dreams, your aspirations are going to put you into position. It just kind of works that way. Even if you're in a place that's very hard up for opportunities, it's easy for me to say as an American, with so much going for me here, you know, from just luck. Luck is pretty important, right? If I was born in North Korea, there'd be a lot less
Yeah.
options.
Yep.
But I'd say first is ambition. I
Yeah.
provided any degree of flexibility in your environment, the beliefs that you have in your mind are gonna lead you towards experiences that match those beliefs. Um, then second is luck, in that you meet those people and those places, and then if you have ambition and you have luck, you'll develop skill.
Yep. Yeah. The golfer Gary player said the more you practice, the luckier you get. So T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Not Spanish yet.
That's the first time I've ever had the not yet that. Okay, two of my film heroes, Evan, say there's no self-expression. Ignore yourself. Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. You've kind of talked on this channeling or muse. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
It's both.
I know it's both, but do you feel it's a little more one or the other?
It's probably more of the times that you live in filtered through you. Now, it is kind of interesting how you'll see, especially if you like reading, you get 2,000 years worth of um, work to draw from, and you start to see patterns. And if you read something like Satyricon, it's eerily similar to Tropic of Cancer, which came out
Wow.
like 2,000 years later, right? So you see that these two people were like
Yeah,
kindred somehow in their selfness, but they're telling you about vastly different times in history.
it's a good point. No one ever says that. Can art making be egoless?
Um, I don't know if like a mother is making a watercolor to save their kid. Like, what is the situation where the person is doing art for a purely, uh, you know, altruistic reason?
Yeah. Wow. Is perception reality?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I do my best. It's disappointing when the rational part of your mind shuts it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything in particular? Um, I think it's possible that all the political turmoil that we're seeing right now could turn out to be a good thing.
Yeah.
Probably a very unpopular opinion.
How do
But
you
yeah,
that's the main thing McLuhan learned from Finnegan's Wake. How do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough? How do you turn a rejection into a redirection? You know, I mean, right here in LA, man, 50,000 people showed up yesterday. That's community showing up.
exactly.
50,000.
Exactly.
That seems impossible. 50,000 people? Jeez.
Yeah, when you can zoom out enough to realize that everything's a chain of events.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's certain bad things that are happening, right? Like this guy who got shipped off to El Salvador, who was just like a regular
Oh,
family guy with a job, and that's terrible. That's terrible.
terrible.
However, there's the next thing in the chain event is that everyone's aware of it, and now there's protests about it, right? And then what's going to happen next in the chain of event? What's going to happen next? And so you
That's it.
just don't know how it's going to impact the whole country and world.
That's why the word revolution is re-evolution. We're re-evolving. So tell me, Evan, one major element of your Evanness that's changed and one major element that stayed the same in the years you've been doing all this, psychology, music, engineering. One major element consistently kind of stayed the same, one major element that's changed.
Um, well, how to verbalize it. Well, one thing that's really changed is my emotional basis. Let me ask you, Jerry, like, if you could put a name to a couple emotional states that you spend most of your days in, just like honestly speaking, like what would they be?
You mean describe my daily emotional state?
Yeah, like what's two or three emotions that you feel often? Here, I'll give you a list to choose from. Um, Apathy, grief, anger, desire, pride, courage, neutrality, acceptance, willingness, love, joy, bliss.
Yeah. I
Um,
would say, yeah,
um,
I'm trying to be positive, blissful, joyous, have fun. Fun is really the thing. Fun, yeah, like the kind of music I like is called funk. So funky spells my attitude. Fun, the words evoke more in their meaning. Fun is the key.
yeah.
It's like, Colbert saying, summarize your life in 5 words, and the guy, it's interesting. But I would say, yeah, but anxiety as I've grown older is fucking increased. Like, and I'm like, why are you anxious? I was like, dude, could chill out. And it's because I'm losing it with dementia or, uh, Alzheimer's, whatever you get as you get older, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? And you're like, no, just chill out, I mean, that's why riding the bike along the boardwalks, the relief, that's how you do it. You just
Yeah.
if if you balance it out, you ride your bike and along the boardwalk and sights and sounds, it's in a community, an amazing community. So yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying.
Could have
But
fooled me.
that's one I mean, one thing that's changed for you is saying you're a emotional basis, you become more aware of it, or you've shifted from like anxiety to seeking love and joy more. I mean, what were you leading to?
Yeah, it's just elevated
You mean
to a
becoming
better place.
more
Yeah, like
aware?
I'm often in a state of willingness.
Yeah.
Willingness is kind of like courage on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
So
So
like I'm
that's
willing to show up day after day,
yeah.
um, and to have a positive attitude.
Right,
Um,
because I mean, Evan, you displayed it. I meet people all the time and I say, hey, come and be part of our event. You actually showed up. It's on YouTube and it really comes across well. Like you read with confidence, like you knew what you were doing. So, and
uh,
you did. But I'm saying that's what's changed. You're saying your emotional uh basis awareness has changed.
yeah, well, when I was younger, I didn't want to admit it, but there was more fear,
Yeah, more fear. Yeah,
anxiety, anger. And anger usually comes as a result of things like fear, because like you're down here and you feel helpless, and then when you get angry, you get more power, more
yeah,
energy going through your body. But the above anger is neutral. You're just like,
yeah.
well, it is what it is.
That's
If it
it.
happens, then good. If it doesn't happen, then fine. And then
Yeah,
you're neutral. And then you go higher into like things like
yeah,
joy and
yeah,
like what you're experiencing, right? So
yeah.
I just feel I'm way up the ladder from where I was years ago. So that's something that's changed.
That's good. But I would say one thing is a lot of I used to go, nothing matters. Everybody's like, oh my God, I got to worry about this and that. It's like nothing really matters, It's like that that's pull the wool over your own eyes, as the subgenius say. Like, don't, nothing matters. So what? You know, you got a ticket, pay it. You did this, well, big deal. Okay, so now what stayed the same?
Um, I'm still curious, man. I'm
Yeah,
still curious and happy-go-lucky. I still like having conversations with random people and picking up random books and flipping through them. And
did you get that from more from the way your parents raised you or more on your own?
my dad is like that,
Yeah,
so I might have learned from watching him.
yeah,
But I'm also very much like that. Just it like from a very young age. As soon as I
yeah,
was able to go and walk outside on the streets in New York, where it was dangerous, you couldn't always do that when you're too young. But as soon as I had that privilege to go out walking, I just started talking to random people.
yeah.
You know, I was just curious
That's
about.
cool. I love it. Okay, tell me now. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell
Yeah.
me, tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Ooh, Feldenkrais is great, man. I
Isn't
had
he?
chronic pain for a while. Actually, that's a pretty good one. So I used to have chronic pain. Um, I used to have all kinds of anxiety, and yeah, that I turned that into a strength. I mean, now if I have some kind of an ailment, my first thought is like, "This is psychosomatic.
Yeah,
I'm creating this thing." If I have some kind of anxiety, my first thought is like, "I'm reinforcing this."
yeah.
And so I just immediately go to solve it from within. You know,
Brilliant.
very few
So,
people do
see,
that, by the way. Almost everybody
yeah,
likes to
well,
get outside, and they're like, "I have a migraine because of my boss. I have anxiety because I have keep saying I have anxiety."
yeah,
Like I have anxiety disorder because I gave myself a label, and now I have to
yeah,
confirmation bias. I have to justify. It's like, nope, it's all just stories.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing. You're a good listener too, because usually people hear the, cute quote I open the question with and then ask the question, they answer the question. But you actually know about who Moshe Feldenkrais is, and you've utilized what he taught. Or fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when,
When you feel powerless.
yeah,
Also, anger is because it has more energy than power. Anger has some degree of power to it. Also, anger is a very important indicator that you need to set boundaries. So I'm not going
yeah,
to say that I never experience anger. It's just
yeah,
that if I do, I'm not going to react to it. And then when I come to my senses, which is a quicker and quicker refractory period, I'm going to say, wait a minute, what's the boundary that I need to be drawing here?
good. Very smart. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into, you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your brain is super saturated with the religion you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So this idea, you create what you resist, not you, Evan, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of times what people resist is what they are.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know anyone else who's like, in their 30s or 40s and dating in this era, but I'll go on like one of these online dates with someone. Anyway, and then they say, oh, well, my ex was a narcissist. And then the ex before that, also narcissist. And then also my father, narcissist.
Yeah. You mean the finger is pointing right at the name calling's pointing right at them.
Yeah, which
Yeah.
kind of turns the mirror on the sneaker. I'm like,
Yeah.
huh. And since we've been here, every single thing we've talked about is just like you. and your needs and your wants.
Yeah.
Like, big surprise that everywhere you look, you see narcissist.
We we should do a salon because I like to do these with 3, 4, 5, 6 people on online dating. Because my age bracket, we never did that and never think of it. Your age bracket, there's no other choice really. You can do the other normal ways, but it's almost like you're forced. You have to do it, right? You have to at least try it. I mean, do
Mhm.
you know anybody in your peer group who never did online dating?
If so, I envy them. There's
I,
like there's this part of my soul that's like having to subject myself to it has just been hard to accept.
yeah. No, I understand. It's just, and we go anyways, it is interesting. Then it leads perfectly to this. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Oh, that's easy. Um, Men move through the world. The thing that's important to them is kind of like a self is respect. They want to be respected. They want if they go about it in a healthy way, they want to be respected for their accomplishments, for the things that they create or whatever they build with their careers, or the resources that they acquire through their profession, whatever. Men want to be respected. No, I think women want to be respected too, but women, I think one of the primary concerns there is about safety. That they move through the world feeling very unsafe. And this is hard for men to understand. The degree to which, just leaving the gym and going through the parking lot to their car is like this life or death
Yeah,
perilous experience, even on a sunny day, even in a decent neighborhood.
yeah,
And guys can never understand that.
yeah,
So for women, they want to settle into that emotional flow, that wonderful femininity, that ability to tap into the rhythm of life and feel safe.
yeah.
Um, so I think that's probably the main difference.
Really beautiful. Well articulated. Love it. What caused matriarchy?
There's a matriarchy somewhere.
It happened. If it happened.
Marriage. I don't know. I mean, I know like a number of households are matriarchies. Um, you know, opposed to the popular opinion. Some are, some aren't, right? And probably have been for a long time. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Guys, men have this drive to create, which, when misused, becomes a drive to destroy. And destruction is just so devastating.
Yeah,
And women don't seem to have that to such a great extent as men do. And so, in this way, yeah, I mean, give them a shot, just give it a
yeah,
shot. Why not? We've already tried the other way for
yeah.
a long time.
Duh.
Yeah.
How do you find peace of mind?
Meditation. Yeah.
This is 5 questions Alan Watts asked just off the top of your head in a couple words. One, who started it all?
God started it all. It was God.
Two,
No, actually, it was Fred.
Fred. I know that guy.
Never mind. I changed my answer.
I love it. You could all, yeah, it's like when I asked my mom, can I interview you? She goes, yeah, but everything I say today, I might say different tomorrow. I goes, that's okay. I'm not holding, that's what people, when I do these, they think that, because it's documented live on YouTube and then on YouTube forever, they think they got to be held to it. Like, actually, Evan, teachers and professors are a little paranoid.
Yeah.
because they think if they're going to say something and then a student's going to see him and go, oh man, you said this, and get busted. So yeah, I like that. I changed it from God to Fred.
Of
Okay, here's number 2. Are we going to make it?
course.
3, where do we put it?
Mars.
4, who's cleaning it up?
Uh, Bacteria that eat plastic.
Nice. 5, is it serious?
Nah.
I
I won't
asked
give
for
you a
90
chance.
minutes. I asked for 90 minutes. You got to go in 5 or can you go a little longer?
Yeah, let's go for 5 more.
Okay, here we go. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I'd say learn to control your train of thought. Um, Focus all your thoughts on the outcomes that you want, on the life that you want. Forget about everything else. Just focus your mind. Just focus your minds and don't let other people program your minds. Don't get sucked into fear, anxiety, negative outcomes. That's the last thing you want. You focus on, you create the reality you want in your mind and stay focused on it. That's what I would say.
Love it. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
A yacht.
A yacht. I've got that. That answer is in my movie.
I
It's
mean,
actually the guy who's played on the boardwalk for over 45 years, Peter Damian. When I asked him that, he says a yacht. Okay, if Evan, if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'd say sucks to live in Rome.
Never had that answer. What's the healthiest? No, what? Excuse me. What's the
Spirulina.
that is
Spirulina.
before I ask the question, what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you? Spirulina. Could be that too.
Also spirulina. People who put the sea moss on their face and go on Instagram, very
Yeah.
inspirational. Um, Cultural shift right now. Uh, I don't know, Jerry. A lot of people knock on the younger generation.
Yeah.
But from my vantage point, I've met quite a few young folks who are they're quite polite. They're very modest, very humble. They gotta like live with their parents until they're 32 before they can afford their first apartment.
Yeah.
Um, I don't
It's
know.
good.
I don't know what the cultural shifts are even.
No,
So,
well, that you're just saying youth. That's fine. Okay, what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
oh, what's the question? What's the answer? Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, it's a good question. Why bad to good people? Okay, how has
Is it okay to eat animals? Or like, what else were we supposed to eat? And don't tell me plants, because I eat those too. But every once in a while, I'm just like, damn, like I'm eating a cow right now. And I don't want to die, but I'm eating them. Imagine
Okay,
switching places. It's like
yeah.
kind of morose. It's dark.
Um, How has playing music, being an engineer, shaped your behavior?
Ah, very fulfilling. Yeah, nice, well-rounded. It's I don't feel like a split person. Um, it's just different. The different outfits, different uniforms, different personalities that you put on. If it was up to me, I'd spend more time in the musician personality and less time in the engineering. But you know, hey, gotta pay for all this.
Right, but how has playing music shaped your behavior?
Put a lot of joy, a lot of
Yeah,
joy in my life. Yeah.
good. Two more and we're out of here. Thanks for your time, Evan. This has been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Gerry.
Okay, Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for hours with me. Thank you. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Especially with writing, maybe there's value in your experiences.
Yeah,
Maybe somebody else might come across this and take it as a token, take it as advice, take it as nourishment so that they can get to the next level.
yeah,
Yeah, because you got to keep going up the ladder in life. It's
yeah,
pretty grim if you don't.
yeah,
So, it's one challenge, it's one glorious it's a joyous thing, but there's challenges. You have to keep improving, you know? And at every step, it's this epic battle. Even if you're just trying to get like a $2 an hour raise, it's just there's these things that block you and these things that inspire you, and somehow you gotta barrel through and do it. And the art, the literature, the music, it's all there to support you. So to be someone who's creating that, you're saying, hey, maybe there's something worthwhile in my story here. Maybe other people are going to relate.
it's good. Frank Zappa says, don't stop and keep going. I love it. You have a good attitude. What gives you the most optimism?
The sun.
The sun. All right. Well, you've touched on this, Evan, because the first question I asked in part one is what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And the last question, what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending time with another person, especially because it was you, Evan. Thank you so much.
Jerry, my pleasure. I'd love to come around to one of your Joyce nights. It's ever since I met you, it's kind of opened up this like literary chapter in my personal experience. And yeah, thanks for having me on. And I'm stoked to know you. Stoked to know you exist in Venice Beach.
I really appreciate this. I'm going to hit the end stream button, but I want to talk to you off camera for a second. Is that okay?
Sure thing.
Okay, here we go. Thank you again.